The divorce papers sit on my kitchen counter next to a cold cup of coffee and the remnants of my life. 3 months ago, I had everything. A devoted husband, a beautiful home in Charleston, South Carolina, and the kind of stability I'd spent my 20s desperately searching for. Now I'm sleeping on my sister's couch in a one-bedroom apartment, scrolling through photos of my ex-husband's new girlfriend, while wondering how everything fell apart so completely. Let me be clear. I loved my husband. I really did. Just not in the way he loved me, and definitely not in the way he deserved to be loved. But I'm 37 now, and if I've learned anything from this disaster, it's that timing matters more than feelings, and security matters more than passion. Or at least that's what I told myself when I married Bradley. We met 5 years ago at a medical conference in Atlanta. He was presenting on new surgical techniques, and I was there representing the pharmaceutical company I worked for. Brad was everything my mother had been telling me to look for since I turned 30. Successful, stable, kind, and completely devoted to me from the moment we met. He pursued me with the kind of determination that should have swept me off my feet. Instead, it felt safe, comfortable, like finding a life jacket when you're tired of swimming. The truth is, Bradley was never my first choice. Or my second. Or even my third, if I'm being completely honest. By the time I met him, I'd spent years chasing men who made my heart race, but never wanted to commit. There was Derek, the investment banker who kept me on the hook for 3 years while he figured himself out. Then Miguel, the artist who made me feel alive but could barely pay his rent. And of course, there was Nathan, the love of my life who told me I was wife material right before he married someone else. When Bradley came along with his earnest smile and his grandmother's engagement ring, I was exhausted. My friends were all married, posting pictures of their growing families while I was still going to bars and pretending I enjoyed the dating scene. My younger sister had just announced her second pregnancy, and my mother wouldn't stop asking when I was going to get serious about life. So I got serious. I said yes to Bradley's proposal after 8 months of dating, planned a beautiful wedding, and settled into married life like it was a warm bath after a long day. He loved me with an intensity that sometimes made me uncomfortable, always putting my needs first, always trying to make me happy. I told myself that passionate love was for people in their 20s, that what Bradley and I had was mature, adult love, the kind that lasts. Looking back, the warning signs of my selfishness were everywhere. On our honeymoon in Hawaii, Bradley had planned every detail around things I'd mentioned wanting to do. Sunrise hike to watch the sun come up over Haleakala Crater, swimming with sea turtles, a romantic dinner cruise. But instead of appreciating his thoughtfulness, I spent most of the trip on my phone, checking if Nathan had liked any of my photos, if Miguel had seen my stories. When Bradley suggested we leave our phones in the room for our anniversary dinner, I acted like he'd asked me to cut off my arm. "I need to be available for work," I lied, clutching my phone like a lifeline. "It's our honeymoon, Grace." Work can wait one evening. Not everyone can just disconnect whenever they want, Brad. Some of us have responsibilities. The hurt that flashed across his face, a brief tightening of his smile, a flicker of disappointment in his eyes, should have been my wake-up call. Here was a man who'd saved for months to give me the perfect honeymoon, who'd researched every restaurant to find ones that served my favorite foods, who'd even learned a few words of Hawaiian to surprise me, and I couldn't give him one evening of undivided attention. For 4 years, I played the part perfectly. I packed his lunches with little notes, attended his work functions, and smiled when his colleagues told me how lucky I was. And I was lucky, wasn't I? Bradley never forgot an anniversary, never raised his voice, never made me wonder where he was at night. He was predictable in the best way, reliable like sunrise. But I took that reliability and twisted it into something ugly. When Bradley would come home after a 12-hour surgery, exhausted and still in his scrubs, I'd roll my eyes if he didn't immediately ask about my day. Never mind that he'd just spent hours saving someone's life. My presentation at work was obviously more important. "You never listen to me," I'd complain when he'd drift off during my 20th retelling of office drama. "I'm sorry, honey. Tell me again. I want to hear everything." And he did want to hear everything. That was the thing about Bradley. He genuinely cared about every mundane detail of my life. But instead of seeing that as love, I saw it as boring. Where was the passion, the drama, the push and pull that made relationships exciting? I remember one Friday when he came home with my favorite flowers, pink peonies that were out of season and must have cost him a fortune to find. He'd driven to 3 different florists after his shift because he knew they'd make me smile. But I barely looked up from my laptop. "Thanks," I muttered, gesturing vaguely toward the kitchen. "Can you put them in water?" I'm in the middle of something. That something. Stalking Nathan's ex-wife's Instagram to see if they were really getting divorced. Meanwhile, my actual husband was in the kitchen, carefully trimming stems and arranging flowers because he knew I liked them a certain way. The birthday incident still makes me cringe. Bradley had spent weeks planning my 35th birthday party. He'd secretly contacted all my old friends, even the ones I'd lost touch with. He'd rented out my favorite restaurant, ordered a cake from the bakery I'd mentioned once in passing, created a photo slideshow of our memories together. When I walked in and saw everyone there, my first thought wasn't gratitude. It was annoyance. "I told you I didn't want a big fuss," I hissed at him during the party. "You also told me you missed your college friends." "I thought this would make you happy." "Well, you thought wrong." I spent half the party in the bathroom texting Nathan, who'd sent me a simple happy birthday message that somehow meant more to me than the elaborate celebration my husband had planned. When I came back, Bradley was entertaining my friends with stories, making sure everyone had drinks, being the perfect host to people he barely knew just because they mattered to me. Or used to matter, before I decided that being married to someone stable meant I was too good for my old life. But sometimes, late at night when he was sleeping beside me, I'd lie awake thinking about what my life would have been like if Nathan had chosen me instead. Or if I'd been brave enough to move to New York with Miguel when he asked. I'd scroll through their social media profiles, careful to use private browsing so Bradley wouldn't see. Nathan was divorced now, living in Miami with shared custody of his kids. Miguel had become surprisingly successful, his art featured in galleries I could only dream of visiting. The worst part was how I'd diminish Bradley's accomplishments while fantasizing about men who'd never chosen me. When he was promoted to head of pediatric surgery, the youngest in the hospital's history, I gave him a lukewarm congratulations and then spent dinner talking about how Nathan had just closed some huge deal at his firm. "That's really impressive," Bradley had said, always generous, always secure enough to praise other people. "He must be really good at what he does." "He's brilliant," I gushed, leaning forward with more enthusiasm than I'd shown for my own husband's promotion. He always had this way of seeing angles other people missed. "Like you," Bradley said softly. "You see things others don't." "It's one of the things I love most about you." Instead of accepting the compliment, I scoffed. "I work in pharmaceutical sales, Brad. It's hardly changing the world. You help people get the medications they need. That matters." Everything he said was so earnest, so genuine. It made me irrationally angry. Why couldn't he be sarcastic sometimes? Why couldn't he make me guess what he was thinking? Why did he have to be so consistently, boringly good? I tested him constantly, pushing boundaries just to see if I could make him snap. I'd make plans with my friends on nights I knew he'd arranged date nights, then act surprised when he was disappointed. I'd forget to pick up his dry cleaning repeatedly, even though his surgery schedule meant he couldn't do it himself. I'd criticize his clothes, his hair, the way he told stories at parties, always finding something to pick at. "Maybe if you went to the gym more," I said once, poking at his stomach while he was getting dressed. He'd gained maybe 10 pounds since our wedding, working long hours and stress eating during difficult cases. "You're right," he said, looking down at himself. "I'll start going before work." And he did. Getting up at 4:30 in the morning to hit the gym before his 6 a.m. rounds, all because I'd made a cruel comment about his appearance. He lost 15 pounds in 2 months, but I never acknowledged it. Instead, I found new things to criticize. His watch was too plain, his car was too practical, his idea of romance was too predictable. The truth was, Bradley could have looked like a movie star and driven a Ferrari, and I still would have found fault. Because the problem wasn't him. It was that I'd married someone I saw as safe while my heart was always somewhere else, with someone else in some fantasy life that existed only in my imagination. The catastrophe started, as these things often do, at a dinner party we couldn't avoid. It was my college roommate Jessica's birthday, and she'd invited everyone from our old circle. I hadn't wanted to go, but Bradley insisted it would be good for me to reconnect with old friends. He was always encouraging me to be more social, to build deeper friendships. If only he'd known why I'd let those friendships fade. Nathan was there. Of course he was there. Still handsome, still charming, still capable of making my stomach flip with just a smile. His divorce had been finalized 6 months earlier, and he looked good. Free. The kind of man who'd learned from his mistakes and was ready to do better. We ended up talking by the bar while Bradley mingled with strangers, comfortable in any social situation like always. "I always wondered what would have happened with us," Nathan said after his 3rd whiskey, "if I hadn't been such an idiot back then. I should have walked away, should have found my husband and suggested we leave. Instead I said, 'I wondered too.' One conversation led to another, and suddenly we were texting. Just friendly catching up at first, sharing memes and complaining about work. Bradley knew Nathan and I had history, but he trusted me completely. That was the thing about Bradley. He never imagined I could hurt him. He looked at me like I was perfect, like I was the answer to every prayer he'd ever whispered. The emotional affair lasted 2 months before Jessica's husband Tom saw us having lunch together. Just lunch, nothing physical had happened, but the way we were looking at each other told a different story. Tom, being a good friend to Bradley, struggled with what to do. In the end, he decided to talk to me first, to give me a chance to come clean. "You need to tell Brad," Tom said over coffee a week later. "He deserves to know what's going on." "Nothing's going on," I lied, even as my phone buzzed with another text from Nathan. "Don't insult my intelligence, Grace. I've known you for 15 years. You never looked at Brad the way you were looking at Nathan at that restaurant. I promised Tom I would handle it, that I would cut things off with Nathan and focus on my marriage. And I meant it. I really did. But that night, while Bradley was at the hospital performing emergency surgery, Nathan called. His voice was soft, vulnerable in a way I'd never heard before. "I made the biggest mistake of my life letting you go," he said. "I think about it every day. About what we could have had." "Nathan, I'm married." "To someone you settled for?" The words hung between us, undeniable in their truth. I had settled for Bradley, sweet, devoted, stable Bradley who would never make me feel the way Nathan did. Bradley who brought me flowers every Friday and remembered how I liked my coffee, and never made me question whether he loved me. "That's not fair," I whispered, but we both knew it was exactly fair. "Leave him," Nathan said. "We're not kids anymore." We know what we want now. We could have everything we always talked about. I told him I needed time to think, but my heart was already racing with possibilities. Nathan represented everything I'd given up for security, every dream I'd labeled as childish. With him, I could have passion and stability. We were both successful now, both ready for the life we couldn't have built in our 20s. The fantasy lasted exactly 1 more week. Bradley came home early from work one afternoon, something he never did. I was on the phone with Nathan, laughing about something stupid, the kind of laugh Bradley hadn't heard from me in years. I didn't hear the front door open, didn't notice him standing in the hallway until Nathan said something about booking flights to Miami for a weekend getaway. "I have to go," I said quickly, ending the call. Bradley's face was calm, too calm. Who was that? Just a friend from college, I said, the lie bitter on my tongue. Which friend? I could have kept lying, could have made up a name, deleted Nathan's texts, promised to be more careful. But Bradley's eyes, those kind brown eyes that had looked at me with nothing but love for 4 years, deserved better than more deception. Nathan. He nodded slowly, like he was processing information during surgery, cataloging symptoms to make a diagnosis. How long? Nothing physical has happened, Brad. We've just been talking. How long, Grace? 2 months. He sat down heavily on our couch, the one we'd picked out together at 3 different furniture stores because he wanted to make sure I absolutely loved it. His hands were steady, surgeon's hands that saved lives every day, but I could see the tremor in his shoulders. Do you love him? The question I'd been avoiding, the one that would shatter everything we'd built. I could lie, throw myself at his mercy, promise to cut Nathan off completely. Bradley would probably forgive me. He loved me that much. But I was tired of lying, tired of pretending, tired of being grateful for something I'd never truly wanted. I don't know, I said, which was its own kind of answer. Bradley stood up, walked to our bedroom, and came back with a small wooden box I'd never seen before. Inside were ticket stubs, restaurant receipts, photos, artifacts of our relationship I didn't even know he'd been saving. Our first date, he said, holding up a movie ticket. You said you loved action movies, but you fell asleep 20 minutes in. I thought it was adorable. Brad Dash. Our trip to Savannah for your birthday. You said it was the best weekend of your life. He pulled out a hotel key card, a menu from the restaurant where we'd had dinner. Was any of it real? Of course it was real. I care about you so much. Care about me. He laughed, but it sounded wrong coming from him. My wife cares about me. How wonderful. He put the box down carefully, like it was made of glass. I need you to be honest with me, Grace. Completely honest. When you married me, was it because you loved me or because you thought it was time to get married? The silence stretched between us, filled with 4 years of accumulated half-truths and settling. I thought about lying one more time, but what was the point now? Both, I finally said. I loved you, but maybe not the way I should have. You were everything I was supposed to want. Supposed to want, he repeated. So I was what? Your safety school, your backup plan when the guys you really wanted didn't work out? That's not... But I stopped, because wasn't that exactly what he was? Bradley picked up his keys and wallet. I'm going to stay at my brother's tonight. We'll talk about next steps tomorrow. Brad, please. We can work through this. I'll cut off all contact with Nathan. We can go to counseling. He paused at the door, not turning around. Can you honestly tell me that in 5 years, 10 years, you won't resent me for not being him? Can you promise me you'll stop wondering what if every time you look at me? I couldn't, and my silence was answer enough. You know what the worst part is? He said, finally turning to face me. I knew. Some part of me always knew I loved you more than you loved me. But I thought if I just tried hard enough, if I was good enough to you, eventually you'd feel the same way. I thought I could earn your love. Bradley, you have my love. No, Grace. I have your tolerance. I have your acceptance of my love. But I've never had your heart, have I? That's always belonged to ghosts and what-ifs. He left then, closing the door so gently it would have been better if he'd slammed it. The soft click of the deadbolt felt more final than any shout. At least anger I could fight against. This quiet devastation was harder to face. The next 3 weeks were a blur of Bradley coming by to get his things, always when I was at work. He was methodical about it, taking only what was his, leaving behind anything we'd bought together. I tried calling, texting, even showed up at the hospital once, but he'd made his decision with the same precision he used in surgery. Clean cuts heal faster. The irony of it all? Nathan disappeared the moment I told him Bradley and I were separating. Suddenly, he wasn't ready for anything serious, needed time to heal from his divorce, thought we should take things slow. The passion I'd thrown away my marriage for evaporated like morning mist, leaving me with nothing but the echo of what I'd lost. My friends tried to be supportive at first. Jessica listened to me cry for hours, made me tea, told me everything would be okay. But as the weeks went on and the full story came out, the support turned to judgment. They'd all loved Bradley, had told me repeatedly how lucky I was to find someone who adored me so completely. "I just don't understand," my sister said during one of our many discussions about my living situation. "Bradley worshipped you. He would have done anything for you." "That was part of the problem," I tried to explain. "I didn't want to be worshipped. I wanted to feel alive." "And how's that working out for you?" Not well, as it turned out. Word spread through our social circles with the efficiency of wildfire. I became the woman who'd thrown away a perfect marriage for a fantasy, who'd strung along a good man because she couldn't have the one she really wanted. The friends who'd celebrated our engagement, who'd danced at our wedding, who'd told me how wonderful Bradley was, slowly stopped returning my calls. Tom was the most direct about it. "What you did to Brad was cruel," he said when I ran into him at the grocery store. "He deserved someone who loved him the way he loved you." "I did love him," I protested. "No, Grace. You loved what he did for you. You loved the security, the stability, the way he made you feel chosen. But you never loved him the way he deserved." 3 months later, I'm still on my sister's couch, scrolling through social media like a masochist. Bradley's profile is private now, but mutual friends still post pictures. He's dating someone new, a pediatric nurse named Amanda who looks at him in photos the way he used to look at me, like he hung the stars just for her. They're planning a trip to Italy, somewhere he'd always wanted to take me, but I'd never been interested in going. Nathan is dating too, some young marketing executive who probably doesn't know about the trail of broken hearts he leaves behind. He texts me occasionally, usually late at night after too many drinks, but I've learned not to respond. Those messages are just ego-stroking, not love, never love. My mother calls weekly to express her disappointment in new and creative ways. "Bradley was the best thing that ever happened to you," she said during our last conversation. "Men like that don't come around twice." She's right, of course. Men like Bradley, who love completely and without reservation, who build their lives around making someone else happy, who never waver in their devotion, they're rare. And I threw mine away because I was bored, because I missed the drama of uncertainty, because I confused stability with settling. The divorce was finalized last month. Bradley gave me more than I deserved, insisted I keep the car, paid off my credit cards, made sure I was taken care of even as I was destroying him. His lawyer told mine that Brad just wanted it over quickly, wanted to move on with his life. No drama, no revenge, just the same steady kindness he'd shown throughout our marriage. I've started therapy, trying to understand why I sabotaged the best relationship I'd ever had. Dr. Martinez asks probing questions about my patterns, about why I'm drawn to unavailable men, about why I couldn't appreciate what was right in front of me. "You equated drama with passion," she explained during our last session. "You thought that because Bradley didn't make you anxious, because he didn't make you chase him, that meant the love wasn't real." "But shouldn't love make you feel alive?" I asked. "Love should make you feel safe," she replied. "Safe enough to grow, to dream, to become the best version of yourself. That's what Bradley offered you. The excitement you're looking for, that's not love. That's addiction to uncertainty." She's probably right, but knowing that doesn't make it easier to sleep at night. It doesn't fill the empty space in my bed where Bradley used to lie, always on the left side because he knew I preferred the right. It doesn't replace the morning coffee that would be waiting for me, made exactly how I liked it. It doesn't bring back the man who knew all my stories, all my fears, all my dreams, and loved me anyway. Last week I saw them at a farmer's market in Mount Pleasant. Bradley and Amanda laughing over some joke as they picked out peaches. She was wearing a sundress I recognized, One I'd left behind because it was a gift from Brad, and wearing it felt like a lie. It looked better on her, like it had been waiting for the right person all along. He saw me before I could escape. For a moment, our eyes met across the crowded market. I waited for anger, for hurt, for any sign that what we'd had still mattered. Instead, he simply nodded, a polite acknowledgement of shared history, then turned back to Amanda and said something that made her laugh again. That's when I understood the full weight of what I'd lost. Not just a husband, but a best friend. Not just security, but genuine love. Not just a future, but the chance to grow old with someone who would have chosen me every day for the rest of his life. And in that moment, I stopped being the woman he used to love, and became just someone he once knew. I drove home to my sister's apartment and finally deleted Nathan's number, blocked him on all social media, removed every trace of the fantasy that had cost me everything. It was too late to save my marriage, too late to undo the hurt I'd caused, too late to deserve the kind of love Bradley had given so freely. But maybe if I'm very lucky and do the work Dr. Martinez keeps talking about, someday I'll be ready for real love when it comes along again. The kind that doesn't need drama to feel real, that doesn't require anxiety to seem passionate, that builds a life instead of tearing one down. Until then, I sleep on my sister's couch and dream about parallel universes where I was smart enough to recognize that being chosen completely is its own kind of magic, where I understood that a man who brings you flowers every Friday is worth 1,000 who make you wonder if they'll call. Where I knew that sometimes the best love stories are the quiet ones, the ones that don't make your heart race but make it feel at home. Bradley is happy now. I see it in every photo, hear it in the stories friends tell when they forget I'm listening. He found someone who loves him the way he deserves to be loved, who sees his devotion as a gift rather than a burden, who understands that steady love is the strongest kind. And me? I'm learning to live with the consequences of confusing comfort with settling, of mistaking drama for passion, of throwing away a diamond while searching for broken glass that glitters. Some mistakes you can't come back from, some chances you only get once. I was Bradley's first choice, his only choice, his forever choice. He was my last choice, my safe choice, my good enough for now choice. The difference between those two things is everything I lost and everything he found with someone else. The truth, as it turns out, always finds its way to the surface. And when it does, you better hope you've been living it all along, because the lies we tell ourselves are the ones that cost us everything in the end. Just ask me. I'm an expert now.